The first relationship between Cook and NASA started in the early 1980s. They wanted to develop a central venous catheter they could put into an astronaut to measure changes in the human circulatory system.
Bill and Gayle Cook never dreamed the catheters they started making in their Bloomington apartment in the early 60s would wind up in outer space.
If there's ever a Renaissance person, it was Bill Cook.
Cook's medical devices, now lifesavers for people around the globe.
You know, I could walk fast. I could walk up the stairs without stopping to take a break. You know, everything just went back to normal.
Cook Medical, a successful, very prominent Indiana family-owned business, now under the direction of Crown Point native Pete Yonkman, my guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast. Bloomington-based Cook Medical is a company that walks to the beat of a different drummer, one that is in tune with lifting Hoosiers and their communities.
I am bursting with pride for how you are doing what you're doing at Cook Medical.
I never thought I would be standing here today in front of all of you, getting ready to open up a manufacturing plant in my grandparents' backyard.
And giving hope and purpose to people with disabilities.
They're not shy about saying, we work for Cook. The thought that they are doing something that helps somebody is powerful for them.
It motivates me because it can potentially save people's lives.
Bloomington-based Cook Medical and President Pete Yonkman in the spotlight on this week's Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. I'm Gary Dick. Cook Medical has come a long way from those first days 60 years ago when Bill and Gayle Cook started making catheters, wire guides, and needles in their Bloomington apartment. The company has grown into a global giant, 12,000 employees around the world, providing medical devices to some 135 countries. And President Pete Yonkman is making sure the Cook way carries on. It's not all about the bottom line dollar. Cook Medical is about community. Whether it's creating job opportunities in a rough area of Indianapolis or giving people with disabilities a chance to fulfill their potential. And I'm really pleased to have Pete Yonkman, the president of Cook Group and Cook Medical, join me on the podcast this week. Pete, how are you?
I am doing fantastic, Gary. It's good to be with you again. You know, I got to say, I just want to say congratulations again. I know it's been a little while, but I tell you what, I find that the IBJ and Inside Indiana Business, it's my go-to source for news anymore. So I appreciate all you guys have done.
Well, I appreciate that. We appreciate that very much indeed, Pete. And, you know, first of all, Bloomington, you know, just in terms of our coverage, we continue to enhance our statewide coverage, go well beyond Indianapolis. But seems like there's a lot of momentum, not just what you're doing at Cook down in Bloomington, but the mill and some other things in Bloomington. Seems like there's a little some momentum down there.
There really is. I think the connection between IU is stronger than ever. I think what they're doing at the Dimension Mill in terms of helping grow technology companies is really, it's all about leadership, and they have a tremendous leader there, and they're making things work, which is not an easy thing to do, as you know. You can put together something like that, but it doesn't always happen. So they're doing terrific work. Well, certainly Cook is and has for a long time been such a huge part of the Bloomington area economy, the Indiana economy as well, an iconic company, $2 billion company. 12,000 or so employees, really one of the true entrepreneurial success stories in our state. Talk about, first of all, give us a snapshot. I think about everyone has heard of Cook, but they might not know of the breadth, the reach that Cook has. Pete, give us a thumbnail sketch of Cook. Yeah, the elevator pitch. So we're a medical device company primarily, but people may also know us from the family's involvement in the French Lick West Bay and resorts as well. But primarily, we're a medical device company. We make the tools that physicians use in minimally invasive medicine. So from gastroenterology to cardiology to peripheral intervention, reproductive health, our informal motto is, if you have an orifice, we'll stick something in it. Yeah, that's good. Well, again, that Cook story to me is one of the great stories founded in a spare bedroom. Bill and Gayle Cook
back in the early 60s. And to me, when you talk about, the Mount Rushmore, if you will, of entrepreneurial success stories in Indiana, you got to talk about, Lilly and Hillenbrand and names like that. And certainly Cook is right there. And you had the opportunity to work with Bill Cook, right?
Yeah, very closely for 10 years before he passed. It was a once in a lifetime experience for sure.
Yeah, talk about him, because I had the good fortune on a few occasions. He didn't do many interviews, but I was fortunate to be able to talk to him a couple of times, and just thought so much of the guy, not only because of his brilliance, his intelligence, which was obvious, but his compassion, his passion for Indiana and helping people. Give us your take, and I don't know if there are any stories you have, but to describe Bill Cook.
Yeah, he's just one of those people that you don't come across them very often, right? He's a typical sort of brilliant entrepreneur, slept only for a few hours a night, whatever, all that. But and more than that, it was just his humanity. He was very attuned to business issues, but he was also equally attuned to human issues, which I don't find is as common in successful leaders and successful entrepreneurs. He sort of viewed people as in the same way he viewed business, which was, how do we make it better? How do we improve lives for people? How do we make this community better? How do we make the business better? How do we make our customer experience better? He would take those same approaches to whatever issue he was tackling, whether it was, building a new business and expanding into a different area of medicine, or it was, hey, we've got a community in French Lick that has these amazing structures, but also 20% unemployment. How do we make sure we do something with the structures that is good for the community too? He just had this brain that worked in a way that was very methodical and thoughtful, and never was limited by what other people had done before. He always wanted to say what's possible, not what have people done before.
And the impact of Bill and Gayle Cook extends so far beyond the business side, as you just mentioned. You mentioned French Lick and West Baden, but so many dollars and so much effort in communities, large and small, all over the state, and because they had such a passion for historic preservation and how that is going to live on. And we talk about legacy, that'll live on for many, many, many years.
Well, you look at the involvement they had in Bloomington. People forget that Bloomington downtown was not a success story in the 70s and 80s. And they really said, hey, we're going to try and start something here. We're going to renovate one of these buildings and start spurring some activity. Now you come to Bloomington, it's one of the most vibrant downtowns that we have in our state. And all of that is because of his vision of what it could be, not what it was.
Yeah. Well, you talk about French Lick and West Baden, and I remember many years ago being down there, even before I started the business show, and as a reporter in what obviously a state of disrepair that whole situation was in, and if Bill and Cook didn't come in and do it, it would no longer be there. I think it was probably
it would be gone. It was literally falling to the ground. So imagine seeing the structures. If you've seen them, they're magnificent, but they're massive. So imagine walking up and thinking, okay, this thing's falling to the ground, but we can save it and we can do something really great for this community. And at the time, not knowing whether he had the money to do it or whether he had the expertise or all this stuff, but it didn't matter. He just said, I'm going to find a way to do it. And he did. And
you talk about the impact, obviously beautiful structures, but you talk about jobs, hundreds and hundreds of jobs, and an infusion into the economy, into an economy that was certainly very much in need of it. It was a very depressed, a tough area, that Orange County area, and it's really breathed new life into that part of the state.
That's the way he approached everything. It was always, he of course would give money away, but he was much more excited about what can we do that's going to be impactful, truly impactful for people. And he believed in business, he believed in jobs, he believed in renovation, he believed in building things. When he did historic preservation, he would always say, I don't want it to build a museum. I want it to have a purpose in the community. I want it to be meaningful. And that was something he was always looking at. And so that's kind of been the way we've approached things. Is we've always talked about, you can do good business, but you can also do good at the same time. And that really comes from him.
Yeah. And there are several examples we want to talk about, because you're doing some very innovative things in that regard. Before we get into that, do you want to talk more current business? And I know earlier this year, you've had a lot of growth. You did have a layoff announcement earlier this year, about 500 employees, 4% reduction in your global workforce. It was a tough choice. I know you're quoted as saying a very hard choice at the time. Was it all related to demand for products? What was the decision-making around that layoff earlier?
It obviously is it's the worst part of business, obviously. But I'll tell you, the world has changed so significantly since the pandemic. Everything in our world has changed. geopolitics, our supply chain, the way we do our work, the way we communicate with each other. So the demand for our products is still there, but our work, the way we do our work needs to change. And so it's the other, obviously our reduction in force is the hardest part, but it's something that we're going through. We're going through a 5-year sort of strategic period where we're looking at everything we do and saying, is this really going to set us up for the future of what business is going to look like, including things like AI and the way medicine is delivered. So, whatever plans we had before the pandemic kind of went out the window and the world's changed on us. And so we're adjusting to that.
Don't want to get too far in the weeds, but you mentioned AI. How do you look? I mean, this AI, this world of AI is, to me, on the one hand, it's fascinating. On the other hand, it's a bit scary, actually.
Yeah.
In terms of what it can be. How do you view, from a business standpoint, artificial intelligence?
Well, we obviously are watching it very closely. We have a team that's dedicated to understanding where the technologies are going, how we do our work. It'll impact how medicine is delivered on one end, right? So, physicians are incredibly bright people, but they're limited to the world and the experience that they have, and then also in some scientific papers. If you can create real-time data, real-world data that's showing how products are performing, how drugs are performing in real time across thousands of physicians, medicine's going to get better. So it's exciting in terms of how medicine will improve. But then we're also thinking about how we do our own work. And just the beginnings of this with ChatGPT and other AI initiatives, you can start to see that it can take away some of the non-value add, some of the drudgery of the things that we do. You can sort of outsource it to ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot's coming. Some of these things that we spend time digging through data, trying to put spreadsheets together, some of that stuff is going to be done for us, which is terrific because we want our folks. We have a lot of really, really bright people that are spending their time doing value add work that we all have to do.
Right.
So it's exciting to think about what people can do when they're freed up from some of those tasks.
How about talent? It's an issue affecting basically all businesses, all industries, not just here in Indiana, but throughout the country. Are you finding it okay to be able to attract the talent you need to do what you want to do?
Yeah, I do. I think Indiana is a place you can recruit to. I think people look at the cost of living. They look at the stability of the state. They look at the healthcare system. They look at the education system. You can recruit to here. I do think it becomes a challenge sometimes for people who have grown up in bigger cities or who are used to bigger cities. But if you have any sense of wanting to raise a family with a backyard, people see the benefit of that pretty clearly. And I think the state's done a really good job of starting to align themselves around talking about what it's like to live in Indiana, what the benefits are. Not just from there's obviously tax incentives and all those things and economic development. But I think it's really showing people what the quality of life looks like in Indiana. I have relatives who live in big cities, and I just can't imagine it these days, right? Especially with the way the world's going. I think having some space for your family can be underestimated.
Yeah, you answered my next question partially there, but how about growing a business, a life sciences health business in Indiana? The state, I think there are lots of things you can point to in a very positive way, whether it's in some of these advanced industries, advanced manufacturing, the life sciences, getting into semiconductors and some of these other areas. How would you describe Indiana as a place to grow a business?
Well, I look at something like the CHIPS Act. We're not in that business.
Yeah, right.
I look at the CHIPS Act, right? Senator Young, great Indiana senator, helped achieve that. The government and the state government are doing what they can. It's now up to local communities to organize themselves to realize these opportunities. And that's what we talk about locally. We talk about across the state of Indiana. These jobs and these opportunities aren't going to just fall into your lap. You have to still do the work now as a community to show why somebody should locate there, why you have the infrastructure, why you have the employees that want to work there. And I think we're getting better now as a state at doing that. And so I'm hopeful that we'll start to realize some of these opportunities.
You mentioned earlier, and I think it's part of the Cook DNA to really engage in community and be a part of communities. Big piece of that is jobs. And as that is related to education, supporting that. I think it was maybe 2015, 2016, and I believe you were on the show maybe talking about it, but the My Cook Pathway initiative. Talk about that, because I think it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as I remember, it was kind of aimed at stopping that cycle of people just going from one lower wage job to another lower wage job, people without high school diplomas, people truly aimed at changing people's lives and using education to do that.
Yeah, that's, if you look at we have a collection of businesses all under Cook Group. And if you look at our purpose statement, why do we exist? And part of that talks about empowering communities and people to reach their full potential. And that's what I think the Cook family brought to the table was, how do we use our business in a way that helps people with upward mobility? How do we change the trajectory of their lives? And that's something, that changes over time. And one of the things that's happened is education has become so important to get that first job, right? You have to have some level of education. It's getting harder and harder. The days of, going to the factory after dropping out of high school probably aren't there anymore. So first thing we got to start with is get people educated, get them the education, the resource they need. And we were guilty of this, right? We had a requirement that said, if you want to come work for Cook, you got to have a high school diploma. Well, when you think about that, why? It wasn't a legal requirement. It wasn't an HR requirement. It was just our requirement. So we said, you know what? We have tremendous resources like Ivy Tech, and they'll help us get these people their high school equivalency. That should be possible. So we created a program that said, come work for us in the morning, go to school in the afternoon at Ivy Tech. We'll pay you full time, but we're going to get you that high school equivalency. We had 300 people now graduate that program. Unfortunately, we have 25,000 people of working age in our area that don't have a high school equivalency still. Yeah. So we need more help. But we've seen other companies take up the same model. And so now we're getting hundreds of people through this system that gives them that foundational element of, you never have to say, I don't have my high school diploma again. You can walk into an employer and say, yes, I have what I need. That's the first step. And so taking those obstacles out of the way. And it really, it's not, I've asked people, those programs are available. If I wanted to today, I could go out and get a free high school equivalency. It was the fact that somebody said, I'm going to believe in you. I'm going to give you a job and I'm going to ask you to do this. That changed it completely. Mm-hmm. And people got very, very excited about that concept. And you talk to people who I do it. I have lunch with all of our graduates. And what they say is most of them are women who were pregnant in high school and had to drop out. And they just want their kids to see the value of education. They want their kids to understand how important that is. That's generational change if you can do that.
Talk about, I don't know if there are any stories that stand out to you, but you mentioned you have lunch with all these graduates. It's got to be, I think on one hand, it's got to be inspiring for you to sit down and hear these stories and hear how this program, hear how the companies literally, change lives.
Yeah, it's incredible. I talked to other employers about this, and sometimes they'll say, well, I'm not sure I'm going to get the quality of the employee that I want. Or so what I always tell the person who's saying that to me, and it's usually a VP of something, right? I always say to them, look, you go take the math portion of the high school equivalency, you tell me how you did on that. And that shuts the conversation down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I'll give one of our first graduates. It was a woman, she moved from Chicago because of this job opportunity. She came down to Bloomington for this job opportunity, this education opportunity. She had kids. Same story. She wanted them to see the value of education, but she wanted something more for her own life. She came to us, went through the high school equivalency program. And then a couple of years later, I was asking about her and somebody said, well, she left. And I was kind of like, oh my God, why did she leave? Well, she went back to nursing school, which is terrific, right? That's the exact pathway we want. She's not working for Cook anymore, but now we have somebody in Bloomington who is a nurse, which we desperately need. And she's improving her life through those steps. That's the whole idea of that program is just don't give somebody a job. Let's get them on a pathway to helping them improve their life and their family's lives.
Another program that I found and find fascinating was what you did with the manufacturing operation that you put in an Indianapolis neighborhood near Northeast Side neighborhood, 38th and Sheridan area, tough area economically. And again, I think it's another example of Cook saying, you can do good business, but also do good things at the same time. Talk about the decision-making process, because to me, on the one hand, I mean, it sounds great, but I would think there would be a level of risk involved there that many companies would not want to take. But you put a manufacturing plant in this neighborhood, invested the money there. All the workers, I believe, are from that neighborhood. And then there's a grocery store component, I know, in addition to that, in that neighborhood. So it truly is investing in the neighborhood. Talk about that project and how it came about, because I think if I remember right, it opened last year, maybe a year ago or so.
Yeah, the manufacturing facility is up and running. We have about 65 employees now, 100 by the end of the year. That really came about. We had a long partnership with Goodwill of Southern and Central Indiana. We were trying to hire people with obstacles to employment, like being out of prison or maybe disabilities or substance use disorder. Found we were not very good at that as a company. We don't understand the needs of those folks. Goodwill really does. They have the support structures to help people get stable, to help them get transportation, childcare, et cetera. So we had a long partnership with them, helping them. They would hire folks and then they would come to Cook. And we said, after George Floyd was murdered, we don't feel like the kind of company that just wants to put out a statement or use a hashtag on Instagram or something. We want to actually be action oriented and be part of this discussion. And so we went to Indianapolis and started talking to neighborhoods and started talking to communities and said, these are communities that have seen, they're predominantly Black communities that have seen opportunity leave over the last 40 years. How can we be a part of that solution? What can we do differently? And so we met some people, Ashley Gervitz being one, was a community leader there. And she said, hey, come meet our people. She didn't talk about tax incentives. She didn't talk about all the economic development opportunities, which other people did. She said, I want you to come meet the people. And we did. And we're like, wow, you know what? This is a really tight-knit community that really is desperate for opportunity, that's put themselves in a place to be ready for this. And when you find something like that, it's easy to put your energy. We needed the capacity. So we could have built it in Bloomington. We could have built it in Mexico. We could have built it anywhere. We thought, why not build it in a place where people are ready for opportunity? They have not seen it in a while. And we can be part of this discussion about how do we make sure that this American system works for everybody, not just a few places in the state or in the country. And so we partnered with them, built this manufacturing facility. Goodwill runs it and operates it. They provide wraparound services for people. And I talked to an employee there who he came up and he said, you know what? This last week, I got my ankle bracelet off. It's the first time in 30 years I have been a free man. And it's because of this job. When you have those experiences and you're doing business you'd be doing anyways, why not do that too? Why not give people that chance?
Wow.
And that's the mindset we're trying to make sure that other business leaders understand is do your business. Just think about it in a little different way where 1 and 1 equals 3.
Yeah. You mentioned Goodwill, and I don't think many people understand the impact and the substantial work that Goodwill does. Everybody sees the retail stores, and those are important, but with their job training and retraining, they are just difference makers to the nth degree.
Yeah, they're a fundamental institution of our state. They provide services, and there's tremendous not-for-profits out there. Just the model that Goodwill has is so incredible. They do all the retail, obviously, which provides jobs. Those jobs in the retail are really about that first step in getting back to upward mobility. They do manufacturing like they do for us, but they also do adult high schools, which has thousands of people every year who have dropped out of high school. These are incredible programs in helping people get back to the workforce that we need, getting them past the drive-through jobs and Wendy's. These are important jobs, but these things that Goodwill is doing is really moving people forward in life.
Yeah. Do you think, Pete, that this model will be replicated or is being replicated elsewhere? Because I think you really went all in terms of investing in the plant, investing in making sure the neighborhood supplied the workers, the grocery store piece. I think the 100% or very close to it participation from contractors, minority contractors. Is this something that can be replicated?
Absolutely. Because the thing about it is it wasn't philanthropy. Right. So we're not doing this as philanthropy. We're doing it as our business. And we're just saying, how do we do it in a way? And what's interesting about it, when you do it intentionally like this, there are so many institutions that come up and they align with you, whether that's Ivy Tech or the state or the city funding, all of the programs that are out there to help people. When they have this opportunity, it aligns them perfectly in their mission as well. And so we got more help than we've ever had building a facility and getting a workforce. I mean, it was like it took on a life of its own, because we had so many tremendous partners there that took a lot of the work off of us. So there's advantages to doing this too, from a purely business perspective. And I think people think about it sometimes as philanthropy. It's not. It's really just doing your business in partnership with these amazing not-for-profits.
Much more ahead with Pete Yonkman, the president at Cook Group. When we return, we'll talk about the early days, Pete growing up in Northwest Indiana, his path to Cook Group, and a lot more. That's when the Business and Beyond podcast continues. Stay with us.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank, See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
Welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Pete Yonkman. Pete is the president of Cook Group and Cook Medical, based in Bloomington with operations around the globe. And Pete, want to talk about you are a native Hoosier, true Hoosier. Grew up in Northwest Indiana, right?
Born and bred. Yep.
Yeah. So tell me about growing up in Crown Point, Indiana.
Well, we were affectionately call ourselves region rats.
Of course.
So, but yet only if you grew up there that you can call yourself. It was a great place to grow up. We always lined a little bit more of Chicago, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
All of our TV came from Chicago, and our media came from Chicago. But tremendous community, diverse community, a lot of steel workers, people who relied on the steel industry for their jobs, and it was a very working class community, and had a great downtown, great courthouse, just a nice place to grow up.
Yeah. So you you're obviously a smart guy. So you liked schoolwork, books. You could play sports, music. What would you?
Yeah,
busy?
I was okay at school. I was not the classic studying until I couldn't study anymore kind of person. But I played tennis all the way through high school. Grew up playing basketball as well. We had Gary Roosevelt came to town one time, and Glenn Robinson was on the team, and that's when I realized my basketball career was over once I saw that level of talent. So moved over to tennis.
The history. I'm fascinated by Northwest Indiana. I know they're concerned up there with the U.S. Steel possibly being for sale. They may be acquired. It has such a rich heritage, population, obviously, gateway to Chicago. A lot of opportunities, a lot of potential. They've suffered over the last number of decades, and it's been tough for a lot of people to watch that decline for whatever the reasons. You could count multiple reasons. But as you look at it as a native, as you look at the region and what's transpired there, your thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of it, to be honest, when you go up there now, it's become a suburb of Chicago.
Yeah.
It's sort of a sprawl from there, which I think presents a lot of opportunity, but also a little bit of loss of the community in the sense of what, I also think it's been out of the discussion at the state level for as long as I can remember. I think we need to do a better job of the state of understanding the resources and the assets we have in that region. I grew up playing tennis, as I said, and I would drive every day after school downtown Gary at the convention center there. It had a tennis facility and play tennis there. And I went back a few months ago to Gary, and I just was sad to see that it hadn't advanced much. And in fact, in many ways, it may have declined in terms of resources available to people in the community there. And I just think we have not at a state and local level done a really good job of supporting that community. And I think we need to do better. Yeah.
And I think, from some of our reporting and being up there, which on the flip side, I think is nice to see is the extension of the South Shore Rail Line and double tracking and a number of communities up there investing in quality of life. So I think there's a feeling up there they can turn things around. And I think, in fact, are to an extent doing that and getting people actually, because of the tax climate and other things, getting people who work downtown Chicago maybe to move over and live in some of those communities, which is positive.
Well, there's something to be said about living in a state that has their financial act together.
Yeah.
I think people are starting to realize that's an important factor.
Yeah. And growing up, as you look back on it, do you have any particular role models or what got you excited and got you motivated to do things?
Oh boy, that's a good question. Obviously, I grew up in the Jordan era. So watching Michael Jordan it was a spectacular time in sports in Chicago and Blackhawks and going to Chicago Stadium. It was just an incredible sports scene back then.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of my life. But, funny enough, I grew up watching Charlie Rose every day. For some reason, I became a Charlie Rose addict early on in life.
Interesting, yeah.
And just watching the discussions of public policy leaders and business leaders and religious leaders all trying to tackle the same issues, I thought was something I still do is go back and watch those episodes sometime just to learn from people about how they did things.
When you talk about that, whether it's a Charlie Rose or some of those discussion programs and some of the discussion that took place, obviously much of that seems to be lost today with, we're so polarized on the left or the right. And, that discussion that you talk about that used to take place doesn't seem to take place anymore.
No, it's awful. I just am so sad to see the level of discourse and what it has become. Because I don't find that to be true in reality. It just exists on the internet, on TV. But when you get with real people and you're dealing with real issues, it's not that way.
Yeah.
And somehow we're making it worse by the national conversation, social media. I find our politicians now are playing to that level.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to get attention by being outrageous. They're trying to get attention by being the loudest voice in the room. I actually think Indiana has a great tradition of leadership, of being serious statespeople who understand their public servants. You may disagree with them, but you can't argue that they're not serious about their job and trying to make Indiana better. We have Lee Hamilton, Dick Lugar, Mitch Daniels. I mean, people have differences in all those folks, but they were serious about the job and they were serious about that. It's just a shame to see that we don't have more of that in our politicians.
Yeah. You made your way to Bloomington, right? Indiana University.
Yeah. Went to undergraduate and law school there.
Okay. What'd you study, and why IU? Was it always going to be IU, or did you think about going anywhere else?
It was always going to be IU. My parents both went there. My dad went to law school here. I kind of in the back of my mind, I want to go to law school. So I studied psychology and philosophy, which are the perfect entrees into law school, as you can imagine. But I love that training. The liberal arts training I got at IU, I wouldn't give that up for the world. I think in today's world, particularly where there are so many issues that you have to deal with, so much technology change, being able to understand how people work, how systems work, how societies work, and all that fits together, I think is, I encourage people. I think people think liberal arts is struggling, but I actually think it's going to become more valuable as time goes on.
So once you got out of IU, where did you go initially? Because you've been a cook for a while, you're chief counsel there as well. But what was that first job out of college?
So I went to Michigan, worked for a title insurance company, did underwriting there. And then I knew some people from all my time here in Bloomington that said, hey, Cook's looking for an attorney. Why don't you come down and apply for that? And so I did. And not a hard argument to make to come back to Bloomington after you've only been out of school for a few years.
Yeah. What's next? What's next for Pete Yonkman and Cook? So many things going on the business side, as we've talked about. As you look at the next, that vision for the next 5 to 10 years, what's going to be really filling your plate up?
Well, we talked a little bit about AI and also the impact on workforce, but I think the workforce in general is changing. I find that we as companies need to do a better job of explaining to our teams how everything fits together, the why of the work that we do. I think that the older hierarchical model of organizations is changing. I don't know if people understand it or not, but it really is changing. My job, I feel, is like I need to spend a lot of time getting people to understand the importance of why they should give their efforts and their talents and their time to a mission. And I think that's something that we have to think about deeply. I think remote work, I know people are trying to move away from it. I don't think it's going to ever go away completely. I think the way we communicate is different. The way we organize our teams is different. So I'm going to spend a lot of time over the next few years thinking about how we organize ourselves, how we work, what it also means to be a socially responsible citizen as a corporation and as a group of employees. What does that mean? And then obviously a lot of the technological advances that are coming down the pipe are really exciting for us in terms of our pipeline and how we can treat patients in a way that we couldn't before.
Certainly, Indiana continues to benefit from Cook Group, from leadership, Bill and Gayle Cook, Steve Ferguson, and certainly you, Pete Yonkman. Really appreciate you taking the time to join me on the podcast and appreciate all you do for Indiana as well.
Thank you. Same to you. I appreciate all the good work you guys are doing at IBJ and IIB. It's really important.
All right. Pete Yonkman, the president of Cook Medical and Cook Group. My guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast. It's a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can hear every episode of the podcast and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gary Dick. We'll see you next time.